there, it's Blue Lily Tea. Today, I'm going to be making references for all the MudWings and Wings of Fire. All of them. Every single MudWing mentioned in the books. I'm going to do all the tribes, and the order I'm going to go in is MudWing, Sandwing, Skywing, Seawing, Rainwing, Icewing, Nightwing, Hivewing, Silkwing, and Leafwing. The basic idea for most of these designs was the wiki description, and I got the idea to do so from Dragon Sheep. I am not claiming that idea as my own, and anything that wasn't mentioned in the wiki, I just kinda guessed. These are the designs I'll be using for every future map I'll be hosting. Disclaimer right now, you will not be allowed to use any of these designs for your own maps and whatnot, only because I'll be using them in some really big stuff later on. The first MudWing listed was Queen Moorhen. Queen Moorhen is huge, as big as Morris here, and taller than her siblings. She has russet brown scales and wears gemstones on her ankles and head. So I googled the color russet brown, and I mostly got pictures of reddish wood. I kind of just went for colors that I thought looked majestic, I guess? For her ankle bracelets, I looked up gems that are found naturally in swamps, and found something called petrified palm, which had shades of black, light tan, and orange, which were the colors I used. Next is Queen Crane from Darkstalker Legends. She never gets described in the books, so I got to use some creative liberty. I colored her with random MudWing colors and then gave her some red jewels embedded in her snout, because I could. Now we have the protagonist of the first book, Clay. Now, we see Clay on the cover of his book, but these refs are based solely on the wiki description and my imagination, so he turned out a bit different. Clay is big and built, with a sloping back, massive lengthy neck, and broad coffee-toned head, as well as glistening white teeth. He is the largest of the Dragons of Destiny, and has a rumbly, deep, warm voice. He also has fire-resistant, mud-brown scales. They are warm browns and shades of rich mahogany and tree bark, along with undertones of glowing amber and gold glinting between the area beneath his scale. His scales are identical to the colors of Ren's eyes. He has enormous feet and thick brown claws, as well as mud-colored, massive, strong-bound wings, and warm brown eyes, like his mother, Cattail. On his right thigh, he has a scar from a dragonbite viper bite. Try saying that 10 times fast. He also has a deep bite wound in one of his forelegs from the battle at Jade Mountain. And now, a dragon I have animated at least twice, Umber. Umber has brown scales and pale amber eyes, and is the smallest of his group of sibs. So brown scales, pale amber eyes, check. I gave him a yellow underbelly because I kind of always draw him with a yellow underbelly, and dark brown secondary scales because I think it looks nice. Sora, everybody's favorite shy dragon with murderous intent. Sora has brown scales and brown eyes. She looks like Marsh, only quieter and more shy. So I gave her that yellow underbelly because I could, and I like it. And now Marsh, the one we don't really remember except for the fact that he was friends with Coconut. Marsh has brown scales and brown eyes. He looks like Sora, just more fidgety and nervous. So yeah, carbon copy of Sora, except I changed up the wing and horn colors. Sepia. She went to Jade Mountain, was in the Silver Winglet, and made a snarky remark to Winter one time. Sepia is big-shouldered. Not a lot to work with, but I gave her some hunky Moto shoulders, and then some random colors. Next we have Newt, whose gender we don't know, and who might be Sepia's sibling. They're never described. I went with paler colors because a lot of the MudWing designs I have so far have really warm colors, and since Newt doesn't stand out at all in the books, why not make them stand out design-wise? Asha, the one we all remember for some reason, but we're not sure why, since she's really only mentioned in book 1. Asha was also never described, so I just tried to make her look like Clay, but with way darker colors. Next up we have Bog, Chameleon's MudWing form. Bog has mud-brown scales and is almost completely covered in different kinds of jewelry. Gold chains around his neck that dangle from an elaborate ruby-encrusted headpiece, clashing with the rows of silver, emerald, and topaz earrings in each ear. Silver chainmail studded with sapphires on his chest, golden silk veils wreathing his wings, giant bejeweled rings on his talons, and a gold tailband shaped to look like a dragon claws clutching every inch of his tail, each claw tipped with a sapphire. He also wears a pouch tied firmly under one of his wings where he keeps his pieces of Darkstalker scroll. So I tried to give him scale colors that just screamed, "Yes, I am Mudwing," and then drew all that intense jewelry that completely took over the color palette. I pray nobody ever has to animate him. Cattail, the dragon who sold her son for cows. Cattail is thin, with brown scales, and wings that have dappled patterns of paler brown scales on them. She has brown eyes like Clay's, with a ring of yellow around the black slit of each pupil, and her laughter is a high croaking sound like 1,000 bullfrogs yelling at once. She was pretty well described, and anything that wasn't described I just kinda made look like Clay. The thought of what 1,000 screaming bullfrogs would sound like haunts me. And now Crane, the dead one who sparked the plot for Moon Rising. Crane was little and thinner than an average mudwing, with brown scales, so I gave her those brown scales, and then went with really pale citrusy colors for the rest of her, for some reason. Next up is Crocodile, the dragon who was secretly working for Skywings and Glory's second death victim. Crocodile is large, with brown scales and wings. Her wings are creased with soot, and she has a horrible scar pulling down one corner of her mouth into a strange grimace. Besides the brown, I tried to make her look very swamp-esque. I could have done better with the scar, but since I doubt she'll ever show up on a map, it's good enough. Now we have Mayfly. I have no idea why, but I positively love this character, and drawing her, and she's just kind of my favorite mudwing. Mayfly has brown scales and a wide flat face. Her back left leg and half her tail are covered in blackened and blistered frostbreath scars, and she has 2 missing claws. So I gave her colors that I thought looked very soothing, considering she's a doctor, and the poor baby's frostbite scars. Ochre? Anyway, he's the false mudwing dragonet, the one who's always hungry. Ochre has dark mahogany brown scales and dull eyes. When Fate Speaker introduced Starflight to the false dragonets, she called him the Fat One. Dark scales for Ochre, and that's about it. It's Pheasant! You know, Pheasant? Clay's sister? Pheasant? Pheasant has brown scales and brown eyes. Brown scales, yellow underbelly, like the rest of the Cattail Children Brigade. Except Crane. And now we move on to Reed, the one who is always sad and just needs a hug and somebody to tell him he's doing a good job. Reed has warm, golden amber eyes and a claw-mark wound on his tail. He looks like Clay and is a bit smaller than him, but larger than the other siblings. So yeah, I made him look like Clay. Now last, and quite possibly least, Swamp. Mentioned in one of the winglets, never described. I figured you were all so tired of brown that this was the perfect opportunity to make him green. It's canon, but uncommon. So that was every single mudwing mentioned in the entirety of the Wings of Fire series. So far anyway. Next up will be all of the Sandwings, so you get to look at some more monotone colors. Anyway, that'll be all. Subscribe maybe, and goodbye.